Good morning. Welcome and thank you for being with us today. And thank you for your commitment to the dignity and well-being of our neighbors who are struggling to keep or to find affordable and safe place to call home. My name is Tracy Dicapali, and I'm the Director of Lutheran Advocacy Ministry in Pennsylvania, or LAMPa. Even before the pandemic, the country was experiencing a crisis in affordable housing. As of January 2020, Pennsylvania had an estimated 13,375 people experiencing homelessness on any given day. Of that total, 1,500 were family households, 977 were veterans, 716 were unaccompanied young adults, ages 18 to 24, and 1,700 were individuals experiencing chronic homelessness. Public school data from that year reported to the U.S. Department of Education shows that an estimated 31,000 public school students experienced homelessness over the course of that year. Of that total, 526 were unsheltered, more than 7,000 were in shelters, and 2,400 were in hotels or motels, and 21,000 were doubled up with other family members, friends, and acquaintances. The data from this year's point in time count of homelessness in Pennsylvania is not yet available, but housing authorities, in conversation with some of our ministries, report that waiting lists are at least double that of last year. A recent report shows a national shortage of 7 million affordable rental homes for the lowest income households among us, with our Commonwealth among the most severely affected states, with only 39 affordable homes available for every 100 extremely low income households in our state. 71% of the poorest renter households are severely cost burdened, meaning they spend more than half of their incomes on housing with little left over for other necessities of life, according to the new study by the National Low Income Housing Coalition and the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. Our ministries are stretching to serve the increasing number of neighbors experiencing homelessness. This morning, we're going to look at one tool for responding to this crisis, the State Housing Trust Fund, a program that Lutheran advocates have worked to create and to fund for a decade now. We did that work as part of the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania. Many of you were among those who were visiting lawmakers to get this accomplished. Today, LAMPa is working again with the Housing Alliance to ask lawmakers to raise the funding cap on this program so that it can expand with rising housing prices to meet the growing need without increasing taxes. We're joined by Aaron Zapia, Senior Government Relations Manager of the Housing Alliance, who will provide an overview of the Pennsylvania Housing Accessibility and Rehabilitation and Enhancement Fund, also known as the FAIR Fund. The bipartisan proposal to raise the cap on the revenues that can go into the fund. Then we'll hear from advocates who will take us beyond the numbers to help us understand how housing insecurity is affecting the lives of our neighbors, as well as the difference that the expanded FAIR Fund could make in our communities. We'll take time between Aaron's presentation and the panel discussion for your questions on the Housing Trust Fund and also on this legislation. Those questions, for those of you who are online, can be put in the chat as we go. Now, I'll turn it over to you, Aaron.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much, Tracy. And thanks for everyone out there on the call today. I know this organization, Lutheran Advocacy Ministries, has been instrumental in helping FAIR along from the beginning. And you know, I'm pretty sure that everyone on this call is at least somewhat familiar with FAIR, but you know, I just would like to take a few minutes and do an overview on exactly what FAIR funds. You know, so we're all you know, of the same understanding here. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So sorry, I'm just trying to change slides here. There we go. What is FAIR Fund? So it's important to keep in mind that FAIR is a lot more than brick and mortar projects. FAIR funds things like rapid rehousing programs for people in crisis all across Pennsylvania. In many counties, FAIR provides the only funding for homelessness assistance, especially in our more rural counties. There's things such as landlord outreach programs. FAIR has gone to fund organizations that work with local landlords that can be counted on to provide housing for people in crisis. Shelter programs, victims of domestic violence, women and children, people who suffer from abuse. These are just a handful of examples. Another is home ownership, especially first-time homebuyer programs for low-income individuals. There's assistance out there for things like closing costs, down payments. In addition, we're talking about lots of brick and mortar projects, which is definitely a critical need right now. But the history of this, this was initially, it was actually introduced back in 2008. It was signed into law in 2010. In 2012, they were able to get a portion of the state's Marcellus Shale impact fee to fund FAIR, but only in the counties where drilling was taking place. So in 2015, we got the real money for this program, which was a portion of the state's realty transfer tax. That's a 1% tax on all real estate transactions. It was capped at 25 million. And then, as I'm sure many of you out there recall, 2019 is when we raised that cap from 25 million to $40 million. So here's just kind of a snapshot of the funding sources, with the realty transfer tax making up the vast majority of the funds. Marcellus Shale impact fee, about $5.6 million in the last round. National Housing Trust Fund does support some FAIR projects. Definitely the least of the three funding sources. So this map, the red dots on the map are Marcellus Shale. That's Marcellus Shale funded projects. All the blue dots are from the RTT, Realty Transfer Tax. As you can see, that's the vast majority of these projects, and that's what our legislation is going to target. So the funds are driven out every year based on a formula. We use the base year estimate of $447 million. That is subtracted from current RTT collections, net collections, and 40% of that is available to FAIR, capped at $40 million. And it takes the lesser of either. It takes if the cap is less, it gets the cap. If the 40% is less, it gets the 40%. Right now we have a really strong housing market in the state. For the past couple of years, the housing market has been extremely tight. That corresponds with quite a significant increase in realty transfer tax revenue. Realty transfer tax, it's a tax generated from housing, and we want a portion of that going back into the housing market. If you look at the overall growth in this revenue stream since we dedicated a portion of RTT in 2014 and 15, it's grown 64%. That's an annual average growth rate of about 7.6%. There's no guarantee that this is going to keep up. The housing market could level off. It can go down. We can possibly experience at least a mild recession later next year. But it's important to remember that, because of this funding formula, because of this 40%, as the market goes down, funding for FAIR will also go down. So we're not, held to any single amount, right? So let's see. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So right now we have proposals that are out there. Senator Vogel is circulating a co-sponsorship memo right now that would increase the cap on FAIR would take it to $55 million this fiscal year. The next fiscal year, it would raise it to 75. And then finally, we would reach $100 million, $100 million cap by 2024-25. So 3 years, we're going to step it from 55 to 75 to 100. There's not an actual bill written yet, but there is a co-sponsorship memo that's out from Senator Vogel and an identical proposal from Representative Matt Dowling. So right now we have a handful of co-sponsors on each proposal. Most significantly, Senator Joe Pittman is co-sponsoring Senator Vogel's proposal, and that's quite critical because Senator Pittman is the chairman of the Senate Urban Affairs Committee. The plan here is just exactly what it was in 2019. We need to get this done in the budget process. And so how this happens is the bill needs to make it out of the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee. Okay, either in the House or in the Senate. It's honestly, I feel that there's more momentum right now in the Senate. This is where this got done in 2019, but we're working every angle here. We don't want to rely on the House or the Senate. We want movement in both chambers. So it just needs to make it out of committee, and then it could be written into the tax code bill that passes along with the budget. It just simply is the most efficient way to get it done. Getting this through both chambers is very time consuming, and we're looking at the the end of session here in the fall. So it's important that it happens now. So the time is really of the essence. Of course, I think we're probably all aware that the budget deadline is the last day of June. There's no indication that the budget's going to get done early this year. They're going to take definitely all of the time to do it, but we're not looking at, we're only looking at weeks, to get it done. So it's important that we have folks join us in an advocacy effort, to raise the profile of this legislation with their legislators. And I'll go ahead and share my screen again here if I can. So I apologize for this delay here. Now that I said I'd share my screen, I'm not seeing the.
Take your time.
Okay, so this is, Pennsylvania State Legislature's website. This is something everybody can access. We're looking at the Senate Urban Affairs and Housing Committee. Chairman Joe Pittman, who is currently a co-sponsor of Vogel's bill. And, here are your members. It's a relatively small committee. Here are the folks in the majority. So we've spoken with Chris Gebhardt's staff about this. I have spoken with Senator DeSanto's staff, but it would be fantastic if if we can get these folks to possibly co-sponsor. It's a pretty small group. So basically, what I'm saying, if you live in any of these districts out there, then it'd be important for these members to hear from you and to hear that support this this program, and the effects of the program that you've seen firsthand. But it's pretty critical that they hear from you, and the more support we have, the more co-sponsors that we have, the better chance that this has not only in making it out of committee, but staying intact the way that it's going to be written with that 55 to 75 to 100. Let's see, I wanted to go and share another screen here, and it's always this.
While you're doing that, I will mention that we do have a letter and a link to a letter for folks to be able to send their senators, and we'll do one for the House too, asking them to co-sponsor the bill.
That's wonderful. That's great to hear.
So we can focus on the committee, but I think it's helpful for all of them to hear from us, since there's such a great need, and it's a great program.
It absolutely is. No matter where you are, no matter who your legislators are, what district you live in, that's where you live, and you should reach out to your legislator regardless of their party, and ask for their support. There's no right or wrong answer here when it comes to who should co-sponsor this, but just kind of pointing out, these are kind of the most critical committees, urban affairs, and we have our appropriations majority members, and again, we can share these links with everybody. You can go on, and of course, Senator Vogel is the prime sponsor of this legislation. Senator Argel has co-sponsored it. He is a co-sponsor. But just looking around at these folks here, it's important that they hear from advocates. Overall, I think that the legislature is paying close attention to housing this year, maybe more so than in the past. We do have 4 key Republicans who are co-sponsoring Senator Saval's whole home repair bill, which is extremely encouraging. I mean, that's another important piece of legislation that's out there, but I think it demonstrates that housing, the issues being elevated in both chambers, and I think they realize that there is a real crisis out there for multiple reasons. We have an aging population. 20% of our, just about 20% of Pennsylvania's population are senior citizens, and many of them live in very old homes. And I think that at least the members that I talk to, they all very much understand that our housing stock is one of the oldest in the country. We have a full quarter of our houses were constructed before the 1930s, over half before the 50s, and they're in need of repair. We can't get rid of them. We need to stop the blight. We need to repair these homes and make sure that they're around for a while, because the current residents, they're not the only ones who need that house. That house has to stay and be usable on the market for for quite a while. So there's some good indication out there. There's some good signs that the legislators are understanding this. They get the crisis. We're also seeing some interesting developments in just our state's growth sectors. We have a lot of big warehousing. That's multi-million square foot facilities that are going in, throughout the state, where there's very old housing stock and there's simply not enough places for workers to live. And that's a huge problem. These jobs are needed, and these companies would like to have a strong workforce, but if there's not enough homes for these people, then it's not going to work out. And two, just everything that Tracy mentioned. There's 39 available units for every 100 low-income Pennsylvanians right now. Our overall housing shortage is approaching 300,000 units. So we desperately need construction, and we desperately need to fund FAIR, which does a wide variety of things, and it's very flexible, and it responds to the needs of the community. Our housing needs there's housing needs across the state, but no 2 counties are exactly alike. So so FAIR does a good job in spreading the wealth, so to speak, in every one of Pennsylvania counties to respond to the unique needs of that community. So yeah, I guess maybe it'd be a good time for to open it up to questions and answers, and please let me know if there's anything that I missed or I left out.
No, thank you, Aaron. I I'm not seeing any questions come in. Oh, up here, looking at the wrong
Right.
computer.
And, I just like to.
I will ask you one, we had a couple emailed ahead of time, but I'll tell you that the theme for this year's convocation was grit and grace. And thank you. The grit being that this issue of the housing crisis and homelessness is a long-term issue, and it's complicated, but we do have some good tools, and Lutherans have been, not that other people aren't advocating for it, but as far as the folks that we're speaking with, have been at this for more than a decade now, responding to the issue in their communities and connecting with lawmakers about it. So it's about the persistence at staying at this, and the grace, I think, in this, it's an example of a bipartisan effort. So can you speak a little bit to why this is getting bipartisan support?
Well, I think the bottom line here is that, housing needs touch every single community in Pennsylvania, right? So whether you're a Democrat who represents a very urban district in Philadelphia, you're dealing with a lot of the same issues that someone in Jefferson County or Indiana County or name the county. There's not a place in Pennsylvania that doesn't at least experience blight, a shortage of housing, seniors who are living on the edge of their means and are losing their homes every day because they can't afford property taxes. They're getting crushed by inflation. They're getting crushed because they can't afford anymore to repair their homes. Or you could be in, like I said, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, where there's a significant homelessness problem. And they still experience all the issues of blight and dilapidating homes. That's ubiquitous. I mean, that is across the state. So, I think it's really something that that everybody gets, that no matter where you are as a legislator, a significant portion of your constituency is concerned about housing. So it really, it really crosses party lines. FAIR specifically has always gotten very strong bipartisan support. It has always been, well, more or less an issue that began in the Republican caucus. Last time Senator Haywood was the prime sponsor of Raise the Cap in 2019. This time it's Senator Vogel, but it was the two of them. It was Haywood and Vogel in 2019, and it is again today. And like I mentioned, we have a progressive Democrat in Senator Saval, who's introduced a whole home repair bill, Senate Bill 1135. And we have 4 Republicans, including the chair of appropriations, who is co-sponsoring it. I'd like to point out too that at this current environment that we're in, I mean, this is a huge election year, and folks tend to be a little cautious, right? Especially I think some Republicans right now about what they're going to commit to before they have, their nominee, right, for governor. And I think it pays to be a little sensitive to that. And I think if this was outside of a major election year, I think we'd see a lot more co-sponsors at this point. But I just think before May 17th, folks may be just a little hesitant. Not that this particular issue is going to play big in a gubernatorial election or anything, but I think it's just the overall approach they're taking to spending.
Right.
The state is definitely at the moment flush with cash. As we like to say, there's perhaps a $7 billion budget surplus. There is still over $2 billion in unallocated art money, American Rescue Plan funds that the state has yet to allocate. There's no question though that a lot of folks are going to take a longer view on this and say, well, there's, in another few years, we're going to be back in the red, which, isn't to kind of, I don't want to dampen anyone's spirits with that, because we definitely have the opportunity right now to make significant investments. But, I think that the folks who control the state's purse strings aren't just going to say, well, yeah, sure, there's a lot of money right now, so let's let's spend freewheelingly. But I certainly think that $100 million over the course of 3 years, an increase from 40 to 100 is very reasonable. I mean, we are more than doubling the size of the program. But again, this is money that's being this is economic stimulus, is really what it is. And I could share my screen again, but I'll spare you the the hiccup there.
Economic stimulus data.
Well, no, I was just going to say, I mean, the leveraged funds from FAIR. We have county fact sheets for just about every county. And I'll just use Lancaster as an example, because I've been talking to a lot of folks in Lancaster County. But in the last round, no, maybe it was 2019 and 2020, Lancaster got $3 million, a little more than $3 million in FAIR grants. They leveraged all those projects in the county, leveraged an additional $20 million from outside sources. So that's huge. And typically across the state, these funds are leveraged about 6 to 1. So when you meet with a legislator and you put the county fact sheet on the table and say, look, here's what your county got, in grants, and here's what these projects were able to leverage, it really raises eyebrows. I mean, just from a pure, economic dollars and cents standpoint, it's like this, we're doing a lot with a little, because
and by
again,
the way, those county fact sheets are on LAMPa's website as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you're one step ahead of me there.
Trying to give folks what they need to
and that's
lawmakers. And could along the same lines, just talking about what lawmakers are interested in when it comes to what people respond to. Can you talk a bit to whether the best approach is to come in with what works or what the needs are?
Well,
in many cases, our folks are coming in because they see the need, but we also have evidence of what works. So,
right. Well, it's a little bit of both, but what we find generally is people respond better. I'll say better, generally, to here's something that's successful. Here's something that's working that deserves more funding. It's not that they don't respond to the need, and I think you have to point the need out, right? But it's very critical to highlight that this is something people like to invest in, things that have a good track record and that are working and that make economic sense. So it's really important to highlight those things and talk about a local program that's had all this success. If you only talk about the need, if you only talk about the number of people in crisis, the amount of homelessness, that then it's kind of like, I think people get overwhelmed by that. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'll definitely say that showing success, showing a track record of success, tends to go farther. But both, right? It's a little bit of both.
Right. So if folks aren't immediately aware of the programs that have used FAIR funding in their counties and how they've worked, they can be in touch with their county housing authority folks. And we have links to the projects in each county if they want to brush up on that before they go meet with their lawmaker.
Yeah, and that's a very good idea. And what our folks have been doing. So lines, of course, everybody's aware that these districts have been redrawn. So they don't take effect until next year, technically, but we think that lawmakers are paying a little more attention to their future district than the current district. That gets a little bit tricky. So what we've tried to do is put together for the last 2 rounds, all FAIR projects, in counties, we can't drill it down to exact district lines. That's really difficult, but we could do it by county. And so we're, we've made county sheets with summaries of all the fair projects. And we could get those out to folks. And this is in addition to the county fact sheets that we were referring to a minute ago that show the overall funds to the county. But this is a document that shows a description of each project. And maybe folks know, maybe you know Habitat for Humanity, maybe you have connections and you can, get in touch with those people who've gotten the FAIR grant and say, hey, we really need to sit down with Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so and tell them how great this project is, and, encourage them to co-sponsor the bill. So again, I mean, we have a lot of resources, no matter where you're at, and we can provide that. We have a lot of tools to arm people with, to organize in your community or to present to your legislator.
And that's why LAMPa is a part of the Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania, right? We couldn't do this on our own. So,
well, no one could do it on their own. We couldn't do it on our own. We need LAMPa. We need organizations across the state, and certainly, Pennsylvania's faith communities, they play a huge role in public policy. And I've seen that. For the years that I was a Senate staffer, and you guys do critical work.
So thanks for the plug, Aaron. And thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning before you go meet with Senator Brown. And we'll say a prayer for that meeting.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thanks, thanks very much, Tracy. And we're here as a resource for everybody. So.
Are there any more questions for Aaron before he hits the road? No? Well, thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you in the Capitol as we work on this bill.
Okay.
Okay, take care.
Exactly. Likewise, Tracy. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. And now we're going to take about a 2-minute break while our panelists come down front. So stick with us. Don't go far. Prefers being in front of me. My goodness. Clearly, which both are pretty much non-existent. You can be okay if I sit here. Oh yeah, you'll be fine. Is everybody set? Okay. Well, welcome back. We hope you didn't go far. And I am very excited to be able to introduce you to our panelists today, who are just amazing people. And I wish we could give each of them an hour, but it's kind of a foretaste of the feast to come, because at LAMPa, we are going to have ongoing convenings of ministries with and for folks who are experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. And so I have a feeling that our paths will cross again. But to start introductions, at my far left here, we have Max Donnelly. Max was born and raised in Philadelphia and moved to South Central Pennsylvania in 2008. He's been involved in advocacy and action around housing and poverty issues since he was a teenager. Drawing on his experience growing up in Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia and his lived experiences with homelessness in both metropolitan and small town settings, Max combines that with his experiences working in various capacities, both in direct service and behind the scenes, providing support for those on the front lines. And next to Max is Tiff Lowe, known as Miss Tiff in the places that count in York City, right? Everybody knows Miss Tiff. She was born and raised in York, found herself expelled from York City schools at the age of 16, but she now works in those schools as a credible messenger, working, as she says, to see more graduations and fewer funerals, doing whatever it takes to keep kids alive and to show them that they have something to live for. Next to Tiff is Kelly Bletchertos. She's the program coordinator with the York County Coalition on Homelessness. Driven by a passion for helping people and service providers, she takes pride in providing the best collaboration opportunities possible in York County to help both service organizations and residents achieve their goals of safe, stable housing for all. And last but not least, Chris Kapp, who in addition to being a Unitarian pastor, has been the housing homelessness field for 22 years, working across the Eastern US, focusing on marginalized youth, poverty issues, homelessness eradication, and food insecurity remediation. She now works as the Coordinated Entry Regional Manager for the Central Valley of the Pennsylvania Eastern Balance of State Continuum of Care, which is a mouthful, through the Cumberland County Housing Authority. And now welcome, and thank you for being here. And I should say, we also have a service dog here whose name I'm not going to mention because I don't want to attract. Okay. So again, thank you for being here. And I guess we can start with Max. And everybody's going to respond to the same questions. We'll just work down this way. And some of our guests will take a little more time with the first question, and some will take a little more time with the second. So Max, if you could start us off by telling us a bit about yourself, why the issues of housing and homelessness became so important to you, and since this is an audience of Lutherans, what particular Lutheran congregation / ministry you're connected with in your work?
Sure. Can you hear me if I'm okay? So probably the easiest answer for me to give first is how I'm connected to the Lutherans. And I'm not connected to a particular congregation. My connection is more through a person, Pastor Matthew Bass. So if you're watching, doing your shout out. I've had the privilege really of working with him and a bunch of folks on the Homeless Memorial Blanket Project, which started in Carlisle last year, and we've got some bigger plans this year. And so that's one of my passion projects that I get to work on. So that's how I'm connected. And then I guess going into my story and like my why. Oh, and before I forget, Chris had permission to interrupt me. I'm autistic, so I sometimes get stuck. And Chris knows my story, so I've fully given her permission to interrupt me for this instance.
Full disclosure, I'm his baby sister.
It's her fault I moved out here. So like we said, I grew up in Philadelphia, born into a solidly working class family. In retrospect, in hindsight, probably paycheck to paycheck, but I didn't really know that at the time. When I was 10, my mom had some significant health issues, which drastically changed our financial situation. And in looking back was probably the beginning of the story where I would later come to experience chronic homelessness. Because we didn't really have the chance to set a solid foundation for me to inherit or whatever down the line. So years later, when my mom had another health crisis that ultimately she didn't survive, I didn't have a foundation to build on, and falling into depression and dealing with mental health challenges, I basically lost everything, which kind of became a pattern. I kind of went from crisis to crisis, which was ironic because I was also working in the, okay, unsticking, rewinding just a little bit. So 2000 was my first experience with homelessness. Lost my apartment after my mom had passed, and I fell into a really deep depression. I worked all, like, my teenage years, had spent a lot of time volunteering in various programs in my community, and then was facing the situation myself. So ended up struggled through like 7 or 8 years of bouncing from situation to situation, couch surfing. At one point, living in a boarding house, which was, I probably would have chosen a shelter if I'd had the option then. It was a really bad situation, but getting the chance to move out here, starting over, thinking, okay, I've got my stuff together now, I'm good. Realizing, nope, wasn't going to be that easy. Ended up having my first mental health hospitalization, lost my apartment, and that began my journey with experiencing chronic homelessness in a more rural, less metropolitan setting. Interesting fact, at the same time, I was actually working at one of the shelters in town. So I would go to work at one shelter and then go home at night to another shelter, which led to some interesting conversations. And it gave me insight into when, our folks would come down and humble about a certain rule or not understand why we did things a certain way. And I would be able to explain, like, I know it stinks that you have to do this, and we can have that conversation. That's a different conversation, but here's a little bit of insight into why, and to be able to express that to them with the unique compassion, not that it's better than anything, but the unique compassion that comes from experiencing something similar, really impacted me and made me realize, that that's such an important piece to things. As we're working with folks, not just getting them, into a situation that's more stable and where they can succeed, but doing it in a way that respects their dignity. And that was one of the biggest impacts on me. And how am I on time and everything?
I'd say another minute just to
Okay.
wrap it up for this part.
Yep. So one of the ways that I've been able to get to the point that I've gotten to, I almost call it succeeding, but I hesitate yet. I'm kind of waiting on giving myself a little bit more time, but is because I've had an amazing support system. And there are so many that don't have that support that I've really been blessed to have over the years. And so I guess part of why I do what I do is to not just be that support, but to help people see the need for it. So that's.
Thank you, Max, and especially for pointing out the importance of that support system, which the church is called to be too. Yeah.
Well, hello, and thank you for having me today. You're going to notice that I'm going to be looking down at my phone because I have some notes. I wanted to make sure that I covered everything I needed to cover in the allotted time. So it's an honor and it's a blessing to be among like-minded people. I'm here today in representation of Friends and Neighbors out of York, Pennsylvania. We are a nonprofit organization that focuses on the well-being of community with things such as homelessness and crimes. However, we also collaborate with Union Lutheran Church. Shout out to Pastor Joe. He provides us with a space for our community to go to be able to just house them, even if it's just for a few hours. And that alone is such a huge impact in our community. So that's just how I wanted to start that out. So here we go. Today, I sit in front of you as a successful, credible messenger. For those who do not know what that is, I will sum it up. I am a violence interrupter in my city, meaning that anytime there's a shooting, I'm there to support not only the victim, but the family. But today, I am here to support homelessness. I live in a fairly good neighborhood right outside the city perimeters. I'm a single mother of a 17-year-old son, and I am currently enrolled in college to complete my bachelor's in education. All these things that I just mentioned is such a blessing to me, being that just 20 years ago, at the age of 16, I was homeless. My grandmother, the woman who raised me, she had passed away when I was just 16 years old. And just a little backstory of how I was raised was in a home full of love, drugs, and abuse. So when she left this world, I was on my own. I packed a book bag of clothes, and I didn't want to stay in that house anymore. So I packed the book bag up, everything I could, and I left. I didn't know where I was going. So I found myself behind bushes, and that was my residence for a few days. My book bag was my pillow, and my faith is what kept me safe. If there was people like Rob and Cher, Nick and Jory, I hope you're watching this. If there was these people out there that are boots on the ground that could have came behind those bushes and found this 16-year-old girl and gave her a tent, gave her a blanket, gave her hope, man, I probably would have been a credible messenger way before today. So I thank you guys for that. That's needed in our community. That's needed in every community. I didn't have family and friends who supported me at that time. Let's just be honest. So to figure all these things out on my own at 16, it wasn't fun. Whew. I laid there many a nights hoping that someone, anyone, would find me and give me a place to stay or even some equipment to be more secure and more comfortable. As I stated, this went on for a few days until I met a friend who let me stay at her house. Again, I'm 16 years old, yet and still, I'm still homeless. So I've been on my own since 16. I'm 36. Years went on and life happened. Between that time, I did go to school. I went to Job Corps, I graduated. I came back to York, Pennsylvania, still lost and confused. By 18, 19 years old, I'm in the streets, I'm selling drugs, I go to jail, life happened. This was what I knew. This was what I was taught. This was survival. This was all I knew. I knew nothing about getting an apartment. I knew nothing about buying a home. So I have a son. My son is here. I need to change my ways. I had to figure this out again on my own. 26 years old, I was working and I had just been laid off from a job. Again, I have a little son to look after, so I can't go back to the streets, and I can't rob you and I can't sell drugs. I have to figure this out. So someone said, you know, when I got laid off, you applied for unemployment. I never knew nothing about it. I applied. They gave me money. They gave me $1,190 a month. All my bills, $900. Let's do the math. I have $290 left over. Again, I'm a single mother. Someone said, apply for food stamps. I know nothing about it, but I did. I got denied. The street in me wanted to go back and sell drugs. I have a son to take care of. However, I can't. So with that $290, I was able to provide food and other necessities that we needed each and every month. I thank God all the time because I don't know how we ate every day. I don't know how I kept the lights on, but I didn't. God did. So thank him. But regardless of how short I came up and, you know, I didn't have this and I didn't have that, no one wanted to help me because I was not considered homeless. I was not considered in need. They said you have a roof over your head and you make too much. How? How is that possible? If I would have went out to the streets and sold drugs, if I went out to the streets and robbed someone, you'd have been quick to send me to jail, but you're not going to be quick to help me. A single mother in need. So many people are still going through this. I wanted help. I wanted assistance. No one would help me. I was denied and denied and denied because I made $1,190 a month. Living paycheck to paycheck is scary. Having a child, it's even more scarier. My son behind those bushes, I couldn't imagine. And I'll be honest with you, if it had gotten to that point, I probably would have went out to the streets. That's where our crime rate starts to rise because we have parents in survival mode. And if you are a parent and I challenge anyone, you're willing and almost willing to do anything you need to do to provide safety, security, food, and everything for your child. I know I am. So that's how I'm gonna sum that up. What am I on time? Am I good?
Another minute.
I have another minute. Okay, yeah, so with that being said, you know, my story could still be my story today. Again, I'm successful, I'm doing pretty good. But say if this job decides to lay me off, I go right back to where I came from. Do I get help? Or do I make too much on unemployment? Thank you.
Thank you, Tiff, for sharing that. Kelly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Bletchertos, and as Tracy introduced me, I am the program coordinator for the York County Coalition on Homelessness. So I'm in the same community as Tiff. I'm in the same community as friends and neighbors. And from a professional perspective, I also am going to thank Union Lutheran because they have been a really great faith partner for us. We've been blessed with a variety of denominational partners in the faith community in York County, and their support of our day center work at Union Lutheran has been absolutely vital to what we've been able to provide, especially during the pandemic, when it was often challenging to find an indoor space that you could provide to folks that had nowhere else to go. On a professional or on a personal note, though, I will say I also, my family belongs to a Lutheran congregation in York County, so I have a personal connection to the Lutheran denomination as well. So housing and homelessness, I got a little teary-eyed after Max and Tiff talked, but I myself do not have firsthand experience with this type of housing struggle. But I have spent the last 15 years trying to help households achieve a stable housing environment that they can maintain, that they can get the support they need, and that when they find themselves struggling after being housed, we can help them find avenues and supports that are available to them to keep them there. That work is really important to me. I will admit, in the interest of full disclosure, I fell into the world of homeless crisis response work, but it has actually been a passion that has just continued to grow over the years that I've done this type of work. So I am happy to continue to advocate for the folks in our community around opportunities that allow them more flexibility and allow them resources to be able to maintain their housing.
Thank you, Kelly. And Chris. And everybody's gonna have another go round. So this is just the first crack at this. So
Hi, I'm Chris Kapp. I'm the Coordinated Entry Regional Manager for the Central Valley RAB in the Eastern Balance of State Continuum of Care. And yes, that is a heck of a title. My connection to the Lutheran Church is through Pastor Matthew Best. He is a colleague of mine, being that I am a Unitarian and serving part-time right now, the Unitarian Church in Boiling Springs. He and I meet regularly to debrief as pastors need support of each other. And I often say that if I wasn't a Unitarian, I'd probably be a Lutheran, thanks to him. I actually came to work in homelessness and housing because I am a 9/11 survivor. You'll notice I have a service dog at my feet. This is Gander. He is with me because I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11 as a first responder. And as a result, I have a lot of health complications, including multiple sclerosis, which he performs tasks to help mitigate. While I was serving at Ground Zero, I was in seminary. I was in my last semester. It was the first day of my last semester of seminary when 9/11 hit. And I was deployed because I was working for the Salvation Army and had extensive disaster services experience. So I got down to what we now know as Ground Zero, was caught in the collapse of Building 7 later that night, and saw some really gritty, sort of horrific things. Talk about grit and grace. There was so much grit and grace at Ground Zero. And I experienced one thing, I experienced many things at Ground Zero that changed me profoundly. I am not the person that I was on September 10th, 2001. That person died when that second plane hit. But the thing that changed me the most profoundly was that every day, a man experiencing homelessness would shuffle up to my mobile kitchen and he would hand me an index card. On that index card, he had printed the name and description of his best friend. They had been panhandling that morning together on the plaza because you could make really good money at rush hour in the World Trade Center subway station, in the PATH station, and on the plaza. You could cobble together enough money to eat for a day or two in a couple of hours at the World Trade Center. And he said that when the buildings started to fall, he was able to run and his friend wasn't, and he couldn't find him. And he handed out dozens of these cards every single day to anybody who would take them, anybody who was going in or out of the restricted area. And every night I would finish my shift and I would see dozens of these cards littering the ground. People all over New York were putting up pictures and posters of their missing loved ones. And I saw these cards littering the ground like garbage. And it broke something inside of me. And I realized that this man would never be counted in a body count. that even if a piece of him was found, he would probably never be identified. His name would never appear on a memorial, that nobody would even know he was gone except for his friends, who also didn't matter enough to be taken seriously in his search. And I thought they couldn't have been the only people without homes at Ground Zero that day. And in that moment, I decided that I did not want to just minister to comfortable, irritating, self-important Christians. That I wanted to make sure that these people whose lives didn't matter, mattered. That I couldn't do anything to save or fix what happened to Ed and to Bill at Ground Zero, but I could make sure that others who came after them had their inherent worth and dignity acknowledged. They had their situations accounted for, remembered, and that hopefully I could make a difference in somebody's life, because I couldn't for the men at Ground Zero. And so I've been doing this for 22 years, 11 years. I did it through the Salvation Army, running their shelters and their social services programs, and now through advocacy and public speaking and working for the Eastern Balance of State Continuum of Care through a fair funded program that we will talk about very soon. And I have 2 seconds left, so I'm going to stop talking now.
Thank you, Chris. And before we move on to the next portion, and thank you for that great segue, Chris, I just want to thank you, each of you, for bearing such personal witness to the needs of our neighbors and to your own pain and struggles, and to the grace of God, which I believe draws us all here together and is going to send us back out into the world and into the Capitol. The next question brings us back to FAIR and raising the cap. What are you currently seeing in your community that points to the need for expanding FAIR? Do you have any success stories you want to see more of, or what would more money in this program mean from your perspective? And we can start again with Mac, if that's okay.
Sure thing. So now my experience is more kind of in the supporting the people that are out on the front lines, and programs like the Blanket Project and stuff like that. So I don't know exactly the current success stories, but what I would love to see more of, and what could always be increased with more funding, would be programs that focus on mental health care and the challenges that come with maintaining stable housing when faced with significant challenges, especially. And also programs that focus on not just adults, but also youth that are, especially in the LGBTQ community, because there is such a significant challenge with, just the, not that the challenges that they face are more unique than any other group, but those are coming more to the forefront, I think, and we're more aware of them. So programs that specifically address that, and also that address just in general trauma, like trauma-informed programs, because if you've experienced homelessness of any kind, whether the official definition or the real definition, I say, you've experienced trauma. And I could tell you about times that I've had interactions that were well-intentioned, you know, but caused the stress because they weren't trauma informed.
Right.
And so seeing things like that, I think, and funding increases would definitely provide for those things and so much more.
Thank you, Max. And I'm a little bit relieved to be able to report that LAMPA is actually advocating on all three of those things. So. Tiff? And by the way, as we go through this again, if there was something that you wanted to say in the first part but just didn't get to, feel free to toss it in. And then we will have questions, we'll take questions for our panelists at the end. So.
Right. So every day in my community, we see people on the streets. But what we don't see is the single parent or the parent that's struggling to make it. We don't see the parent that is working 2 and 3 jobs just to provide. We don't see the parent that is making $10 an hour, but the system states that he or she makes too much to receive any help. And if she goes over or he goes over 50 cents more, the benefits that they do receive will get cut. These are the things that we don't see. We clearly see the people that are sleeping in tents and sleeping on park benches. You see the man that folds his belongings up every day under the bridge. He goes to work for pennies and hopes that when he gets off, his tent and belongings are still there and untouched. These stories alone are more than enough reason to expand FAIR. It is more than enough to look at the root cause of homelessness and fix it. I want to see success stories where the single mother that was on Section 8 takes home buyers classes and one day buys her first house. I want to see the man that lives on the streets but works every day given a chance to prove that he can maintain an apartment and that FAIR provides him with assistance on his first month's rent and security deposit. I want to see the parent who was just laid off and tried everything in her power to provide a roof over her and her children's head, some rental assistance during her time of struggle. What would more money in this program mean? It would mean that people would have a place to call home. It would mean that we could reduce crime because people would not have to commit crimes to provide a roof over their head. In all actuality, we need these funds. We need these funds for families. We need these funds to provide assistance, but also educate. So you have so many people that, and I'll throw myself out there, that knew nothing, knows nothing, I know now, about home buying. You know, when you're always in survival mode, you don't have time to take classes. You don't have time to listen. Only thing you're worrying about is, where is my next meal coming from? Am I going to be able to keep these lights on? Is my child going to be safe? You know, like I said, I am a credible messenger and I deal with crime and violence. And a quick story is of a young man, may he rest in peace. 17 years old, he lost his life. And prior to him losing his life, him and I spoke. And some of the things that he was doing, you know, I told him, I said, listen, if you don't tighten up, you're going to either lose your life to the streets or you're going to go to jail. And 1 week before that young man passed, you know what he told me? He said, Miss Tiff, if my mom could just up and move, could find a way to just get out of the city, I could live. However, every day I walk out my front door, I still have to live here. I still have to be in survival mode. Well, this young man lost his life not even 2 minutes away from his house because there was no assistance. There was no help. There was no resource. There was nothing I could physically do to move this young man to save his life. So again, what would this money do? It's going to save these babies' lives. It's going to provide homes for families. It's going to turn this whole thing around that we are all fighting. And even though many of you that are watching this and many of you that are listening, you don't walk outside every day and wonder if you're going to die or not. When you go in your house, you know that your bills are more than likely probably paid up for the year. You don't worry about where your next meal is going to come from. However, we have a community, a huge population of people that do. So again, you may not personally need the money, but your community does. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiff.
So I'm going to kind of echo a little bit of what Tiff talked about. She talked a little bit about our unsheltered populations, but something else we see is we see more and more people in our community right now that are in unique situations. I say that because they're also widely varied. It is really on a case-by-case basis. And what we're finding is more and more situations where a traditional, often federally funded housing program is not going to be a fit for them, or a traditional emergency shelter that you would commonly think of is not going to work for them. We see a lot of people with animals, oftentimes emotional support animals, as opposed to a service animal, which would be allowed in most areas, but an emotional support animal is not. And so we find these households are not seeking assistance because they've been told, well, you need to board, you need to find somewhere to put your animal. That animal can't enter this housing program. It's challenging to find a rental unit when you have animals. And so they're hit with this extra level of burden, and we find them staying in their cars so that they can stay with the animals that mean so much to them. We also talked a little bit at the beginning about our aging population in York County. We are no different in York than anywhere else in the state. And we are seeing more people, not just amongst the elderly, but certainly a high percentage there with medical or accessibility issues, and finding an appropriate safe space for them in the short term, like a shelter, is much harder. And so we're failing them in some capacities. If you have an oxygen tank, for example, it can be very hard to enter a congregate shelter space. But you need that, obviously, for your quality of life. So we see all these unique situations that often our larger funding from the federal government doesn't allow us the flexibility to help. The priorities set on those large federal funds are typically national priorities. They don't allow us the flexibility at a local level to say, these are the households we're failing, and this is how we can make it better. And so something like FAIR allows us the opportunity to step into those households and those situations and make an enormous impact on them that we simply can't do with other more rigid funding sources. I will also say, we talked about coordinated entry with the Eastern Balance of State. York County has coordinated entry as well, and it's a strange term. So for those that might not know, coordinated entry is the idea that you are prioritizing households for financial assistance and for housing support. And the reason being is that there is not enough within your traditional funding streams to help everyone that is looking for help. And so what the coordinated entry system does is allows you to take those households with the most severe needs, and to Max's point, meet the very narrowest of homeless definitions, and be able to prioritize them to serve those with the greatest need first. But what that means is we still have an enormous population that don't, quote unquote, have the greatest need, but have an enormous need of their own. And we also have a lot of people that are homeless, but they're living in a hotel, They are staying with someone, or they've bounced around to every person they've known, including people that they just met, that said, yeah, sure, you can come stay with me, that we're not able to help with those traditional sources. But that's where FAIR allows us to step in, and it allows us to say, we can help you with this funding stream. So it doesn't replace what we already have. It expands our opportunity to provide more housing support in our communities. I will just take a few minutes to talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing in York County that have benefited from FAIR, because they kind of apply to those situations. We have a FAIR funded rental assistance fund in York County, and we've had it for a couple of years. And we use those dollars to help folks that don't meet the federal strict U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development definition of homelessness, which is incredibly challenging. You need to be in a place not meant for habitation. You need to be in a car, in a tent, behind a set of bushes. You need to be in a building or a camper with no utilities, or you need to be in an emergency shelter. And if you're not one of those, then we can't help you. So what this FAIR rental assistance allows us to do is it allows us to step into situations where someone is living in a hotel, or they are staying with someone, but it is not a way for them to stabilize their household at all, and be able to provide them with rental assistance and case management and help them get back on their feet. We've done this over and over again over the years we've had this, but more recently we had a single father with a child who had been living in a hotel, paying for that hotel on his own. He worked full time, made not bad money, but if anyone's ever stayed in a hotel for a week, you know how incredibly expensive that is. And so most of the money he was making at his job every day went to paying for that hotel. And so he had no opportunity to save, to move into a unit. Sometimes nowadays asking 3 times the rent to move in. And double security, correct? And so he came to us and he said, I can maintain housing for me and my son, but I can't afford to move in. So we were able to take those FAIR funds and help him with all of those different charges to move into a unit. And he's been stable for 9 months. He still checks in once in a while with the program to say how he's doing, and he's done really well. And it's those kinds of opportunities that are phenomenal. To not have to tell someone, I'm sorry, you need to be sleeping outside. You're not homeless enough. You need to be sleeping outside. You need to go to shelter in order for me to help you, is really hard. We recognize why we're trying to support those folks. They are often the people that don't have any support network left, but there are plenty of folks whose support networks are crumbling and cracked that also need that help for stable housing. We also have a kind of a neat program through one of our organizations in York County that does foreclosure prevention. They originally did it as an all ages program and found that everyone they were serving was 62 and up. And so as they came back for additional funding from FAIR last year for that program, they dedicated it to seniors. And so what they're doing with that program is we find a large number of seniors who are behind on their taxes. They are fixed income, but are maintaining the actual property, but the taxes are crushing them. And as our realty structure and the price of housing goes up, those tax structures shift as well, and they are falling behind. And so that program allows them to receive financial assistance on their back taxes, but also provides a support component to look at ways to make sure that they don't fall behind again, to find alternative solutions to keep them in their home where they want to be, but be able to not have this happen moving forward. So we've been able to keep seniors in their homes with these very flexible funds as well. The largest thing about your large housing funding sources is that they are very narrow. We talk a lot about breaking down silos in housing with other, other areas with substance use treatment or with mental health or all of those things, but we have silos within our own housing structure that make this challenging. But something like FAIR allows us the flexibility to say what we need and to cross systems if we need to. And that is invaluable. It also, and Aaron alluded to this earlier on, it also allows us with a really great way to not only match dollars to a more narrow and rigid program, but allows us to fill the gaps in those programs created by the rigidity of the original funding source. So it's not just this FAIR funded program is by itself and FAIR is the only funding. It's being able to say FAIR is helping me provide match on another funding source. And in doing so, it's also providing me with the flexibility to help someone with their back taxes or to help someone who is in a rapid rehousing program for the very first time as a youth, be able to set up their household with basic necessities that you need. We talk a lot about rental assistance and putting people in housing. A lot of people go into housing with nothing but a backpack full of clothes. So being able to support them in basic things like having amenities in your kitchen and having a bed to sleep on and those types of things is valuable. But rental assistance programs from other sources won't allow you to do that. So the flexibility behind FAIR is what makes it so incredibly important. And being able to expand that flexibility so that we can do more with populations that we continually have to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you, is enormous for every community in Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Kelly.
Kelly, that was a great segue. And a pretty darn solid explanation of coordinated entry. Thank you. Well, full disclosure, my position wouldn't exist if it wasn't for FAIR. The Housing Alliance of Pennsylvania holds the grant that pays for the Eastern Balance of States regional managers. And because of that, it has allowed us as a larger entity than a one county entitlement community to break down some of those silos. You talked about that, and that's important because it used to be every county was its own thing, right? And let me echo what you said, the HUD definition of homelessness is complete BS. It's terrible. It's horrifying to have to say to a family, yes, we know your children are considered homeless by their school. We know that you're receiving homeless services through the school, through the McKinney-Vento Children's Homeless Children's Education Act, but you're not homeless enough to get housing. What kind of ridiculous crap is that, really? So while you're contacting your legislators, please contact them also about merging the definitions, because right now there's a massive disconnect. And please know that people who are boots on the ground working in this field also think that definition is garbage, and it's not fair. But FAIR, P-H-A-R-E, helps to equalize the playing field and make the playing field a little more fair, F-A-I-R. And one of the ways we're doing that is in my region of the Eastern Balance of State, which is 11 counties. It's called the Central Valley. I am taking a collective impact approach towards dealing with homelessness, dealing with housing insecurity. We know that there is not enough funding. You mentioned that. We are still essentially working with the same budget that we had in the Nixon administration. That should say something. That was before I was alive, not long, but it was before I was alive. So there's just not enough. And there are these people who are considered low priority because we do triage people now like a hospital waiting room, which is good on a lot of levels because it allows us to look at people from a lot of different angles and wrap services around them. But when you use coordinated entry as a collective impact model, you are leveraging these non-traditional partnerships like the faith community, like street medicine, like businesses, lawmakers, all of these interested parties in these communities that might not necessarily have considered themselves a housing provider, but who can help wrap services around some of these more low touch, low acuity folks so that they too can get back on their feet. I'm going to share an example out of Schuylkill County, which is one of the best examples, chef's kiss, best examples of how coordinated entry's non-traditional collective impact approach through this partnership with FAIR can help some of these low acuity folks. We had a woman about 4 years ago who was fleeing domestic violence with her 3 children, young children, pre-kindergarten age children. She ended up at a seedy motel in the middle of nowhere, about 5 miles outside of a fairly large town in Schuylkill County. And she was highly employable. She was a registered nurse, but she couldn't get a job because she didn't have a vehicle. And you can't leave 3 kids under 5 in a hotel room. That raises a little bit of the heckles of CYS. So this poor woman was trapped. So one of the things I'm able to do through my position, funded by FAIR, is form these partnerships. And every month we have a roundtable where we can case conference with all the different agencies at one time who have a partnership agreement with me. And so this was pre-pandemic, so we were sitting in a room together around a table, and I explained the situation. And I had a pastor speak up and say, you know what? I just had a congregant who passed away. His wife doesn't drive. I wonder what she's doing with his car. Well, there's a solution that, HUD funded people can't think of, right? And then another church stepped up and said, if you can get her a car, we'll pay her hotel bill for 3 months so that she can bank all of the money that she'll get from her RN job so that she can actually get into housing. A third church said, we have a preschool. Let's enroll those kids. And then a rapid rehousing provider was able to step up and say, we can do a step down, for 4 months to help her so she doesn't have to right off the bat be paying everything. We had a local charity that does like a furniture bank say that they would help furnish her home. Within 90 days, this woman was employed, had a vehicle, had moved into a unit, did not need rapid rehousing, had a fully furnished apartment. Her kids were in preschool. They were thriving. She was receiving victim services through the local victim service provider and didn't need 1 penny of federal funding to do so. Not 1 penny. All of these agencies were able to work together. They were able to come around her, surround her, wrap services around her so that the little funding we did have could help somebody who couldn't help themselves. She just needed a springboard. And that's what coordinated entry can do. And FAIR is funding that. FAIR is funding this wacky idea that we can all help each other because we all need each other more than we know, right? That's something my congregation says to each other all the time. We need each other more than we know. And FAIR can help make that a real reality. And that situation, it's been 4 years. She doesn't need any assistance from anybody. She's actually now donating back to some of these churches who helped her. She's paying it forward. And her life completely changed because we were able to work together. And the reason we were able to work together and be so flexible is through these flexible FAIR funds. We've got to keep this going, because there's never going to be enough money from the feds. The definition is always going to be too narrow. And if we are truly saying that people are first, then we have to keep doing the right thing. And sometimes that means thinking so far outside the box that you have to blow the box up. And FAIR helps us do that.
Thank you. Thank you all. I don't think we could ask for any better storytellers and advocates to make the case for this. And now we urge those of you who are watching online, or those of you who are seeing this posted online a few days or weeks from now, but hopefully in the near future, we urge you to take a few minutes. It only takes a couple minutes to send a letter to your lawmaker through the link on our website, www.lutheranadvocacypa.org, and select the alert that says building on what works. It's helpful to customize your letter with a personal note to your lawmaker. It only takes a couple minutes, not kidding, to make a world of difference. And those who registered for this event will receive that link in the follow-up email. Thank you to all of you amazing people for what you do every day by your example and in your vocation. Thank you for your time this morning, and for in advance for all of what I know we're going to do together. For those who are interested in gathering regularly, virtually or in person, with others who are engaged in housing and homeless ministry, drop us a line through LAMPa's website, or send an email to lampa@lutheranadvocacypa.org. Thank you for your advocacy.